Raw was better than SmackDown this week, but not by much. The in-ring is what really carried Raw. But also by virtue of not being 3 hours, that automatically gives Raw a leg up on SmackDown. And speaking of SmackDown, PW Insider is reporting that Road Dogg, Brian James, has been named the new lead co-writer for SmackDown, joining John Swakata, an unfortunate last name because that's not how I read it, in heading creative for the Blue Brand. And hearing this, I find myself filled with dread. Sounds like he's first taking over now. Because Triple H does not get a pass for this. SmackDown has not been great for a while now. It's not like the show couldn't use an overhaul. But Road Dogg, I guess the DX takeover of creative across the entire company is nearly complete. We just need Waltman now in charge of Raw. This is the same Road Dogg who took over as the lead writer on SmackDown at the end of 2016, and the quality of the show nosedived after that, to the point where the fans even started a hashtag, Fire Road Dogg, on social media. But that was also still the Vince McMahon era, and what we saw on TV was what Vince McMahon wanted us to see, or what they thought Vince McMahon wanted to see. So now the Sex Pest is gone, and Road Dogg is writing for someone else. So we'll see how that goes. You know, Road Dogg said one of the reasons he quit as head writer the first time was that he was just sick and tired of Vince McMahon tearing his work apart. So was it a case where he had good ideas and Vince made them worse? Or did Vince change them because they sucked? And as bad as what we saw on television was, it would have been even worse had he not ripped it apart and changed it. See, that's the question. Right? He was one of the ones writing at the time for the Kofi Mania stuff, heading into WrestleMania 35. He was writing for the Angle with Randy Orton joining the Wyatt family. But my God, I mean, there was so much bad shit during that period. And it wasn't just SmackDown. It was both shows. At various points between 2017 and 2019, like during that period, for all the good things that we did get out of that period, because it wasn't all bad, but for all the good things we may have gotten, it was the absolute creative bottom for that company. Just dreadful. And at 3 hours, I don't know that anybody can save SmackDown. I don't think that show is going to get tolerable until it goes back to 2 hours in a few months, and we're just going to have to just grit our teeth and wait until we get there. That's not an excuse, though, to put on boring shows, right? You could certainly come up with some fresh ideas, but I really don't think SmackDown is going to benefit from any changes now in the way that it could until they reduce the show from 3 hours to 2 hours, because they're still working with a 2-hour roster, and they're trying to stretch, and it's making for these long, boring stretches where maybe the third hour is good, but the first two are fucking terrible. Like, it's just, SmackDown has become the worst show of the week. So if they want to make changes to the show, I don't see how it can get much worse. You know, it's like, okay, well, let's see what happens. But I'm telling you, the 3 hours is not the only problem with SmackDown, but it's a very big problem with that show right now. Now, going back to Raw Monday night, they opened the show with a hot angle with Jey Uso coming out, doing his entrance. Everybody's going wild. And then Gunther comes out and trips him up. And we got a brawl between them. And then ultimately Jey says, you know what? I've made my choice. Gunther, it's going to be you and me for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. It was the obvious choice. Everybody knew he was going to pick Gunther. That's not a surprise. But the way they did the angle, I thought it was well done. Then you fast forward to SmackDown on Friday. Charlotte Flair comes out after Tiffany Stratton's match with Nia Jax and chooses Tiffany as her opponent to challenge for the WWE Women's Championship at WrestleMania, which again, not a surprise. I think most people expected that it was going to be Charlotte and Tiffany and not Charlotte and Rhea Ripley. Trish Stratus was on SmackDown Friday night as well. We come to find out that she's going to be teaming with Tiffany against Nia and Candice LeRae in Toronto at the Elimination Chamber. So getting Trish on that show in Toronto makes all the sense in the world. She tried to come to Tiffany's aid on Friday after her match with Nia, and so she got kind of all mixed up with Nia and Candice, hence the tag team match that we're going to be getting. Now, Rhea Ripley is not going to be defending against Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania. However, she will be defending her women's world title against Io Sky. But it will not be at WrestleMania, but it will be on the Raw after the Elimination Chamber. That does not mean that we still won't get it, though, at WrestleMania. we still could very well end up getting Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. But if we do, it's going to have to be a triple threat match because the winner of the Elimination Chamber is guaranteed a shot at Rhea's championship. Now that we know that Tiffany has her opponent, that Elimination Chamber match becomes a guaranteed shot at Rhea Ripley's title. Io Sky is not in the Elimination Chamber. So if you are someone who wants to see Io Sky challenging Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, then you're hoping for a triple threat match is what you're hoping for, because that's the only way that it happens. And I'm going to get into the Mania stuff here in a second. So we'll talk about what that might look like. But Logan Paul, Damian Priest, Bayley, and Naomi, they have all qualified this week for their respective Elimination Chamber matches. So there's only a couple of spots left. Lyra Valkyria and Chelsea Green. Those are your two women's mid-card champions right now in WWE. Lyra is the Intercontinental Champion. Chelsea Green is the United States Champion. They both got pinned in qualifying matches in the same week. It's just bad optics. Both of your champions get pinned and beaten in the same week. What does that say for what WWE and Triple H thinks of these two titles that they just established? This is the reason why I was not against the idea of them establishing an Intercontinental title, okay, or a U.S. title, one or the other, right? I would prefer IC because if you ask me of all with the men's titles, even like, what do I look at better, the Intercontinental title or the U.S.? Well, I grew up with the Intercontinental title and watching those guys and watching those matches, so I will always choose the IC over the U.S. But I was in favor of trying it and saying, you know what, they have the talent for it. They just have to come up with good stories. But okay, fine. You want to introduce an IC title? Go for it. Don't do both. Just because you do one doesn't mean, well, we got to do the other. Start out with one, even if the champion floats between shows, see how it goes. And if it goes well, you can always introduce a women's US title later in the year. You don't have to do them both at the same time. So what did they do? They did them both at the same time. Because we have to have parity here between the two brands. And I am unimpressed by what they have done so far. It's only been a couple of months. I am thoroughly unimpressed. Lyra Valkyria is going to be defending her title soon against Ivy Nile. That's what they seem to be building towards. But she won that championship on January 13th, I believe it was, right? She beat Dakota Kai in the finals. And up until this past week, I'm not even counting the Royal Rumble. I mean, in terms of matches, she had not wrestled. She won the title, and then she sat and did nothing for a month. And then her first match after winning the championship, she fucking loses. What are we doing here? But, all this talk about WrestleMania, let's talk for a little bit here about WrestleMania 41. Because I see a lot of discourse online about WrestleMania. What do you think of the card so far? I should point out that we legitimately only have 2 matches official, okay? We only have 2 matches so far official for WrestleMania. So we don't know for sure where things are going to land, right? We could come back and have this conversation and run this back in a month and be like, wow, okay, well, this is a hell of a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. But I think we have a pretty good sense of where certain things are headed. So the question is, like, what do you think about the WrestleMania card so far, the way it looks like it's shaping up? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's lackluster? If you think the WrestleMania card feels lackluster, there's a good reason for that. And you got to remember where we were a year ago. A year ago, all of the talk was around The Rock and what The Rock almost did to Cody Rhodes in his title match at WrestleMania. And then they had to blow up their plans and they had to pivot, right? That was the word of WrestleMania season. They pivoted. We have to pivot. Well, they made the pivot, and it was the right pivot to make because we ended up with Final Boss Rock, which injected an energy into the shows that just isn't there when he's not there because he's The Rock. So obviously when he's around and he's playing heel and he's healing on the fans, right? It's very entertaining. And it's just a different vibe when he's around. So we have The Rock on TV on some weeks. And Cody Rhodes was finishing his story. This fucking story that he was going to finish, right? This story they were telling for 2 years. It was all culminating in that rematch with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. That's the difference between the WrestleMania build from a year ago and the WrestleMania build from now. They had that core story, that long-term story with Cody that they paid off. They don't have anything like that this year. And they don't have The Rock. So you wonder what's missing from where we were a year ago. That's what's missing. And so you look at some of the matches that are being proposed, and some of the matches are more appealing than others, but I think that has a lot to do with why this card so far is feeling very lackluster compared to last year, because those are two very big things that we don't have going into this year's show. Cody Rhodes is now the defending WWE champion. Who is he going to defend his title against? There's still multiple options as to who that could be. The likeliest option is John Cena. John Cena is in the Elimination Chamber. He didn't have to qualify for it because he's John Cena. He was in the Royal Rumble. He lost. He's going into the Elimination Chamber. I don't want to get ahead of myself with predictions. I think it's a hell of a lot more likely he wins this time. So we're looking at Cody Rhodes against John Cena. That's probably, if you had to rank them in terms of possible matches, the one that would be ranked number one as far as the likeliest to happen. Now, I will point out to you that last week on Pat McAfee's show, he had Ari Emanuel on, right? He's the head of everything when it comes to Endeavor and TKO. He's the head honcho. And he was talking about the Elimination Chamber. And Ari Emanuel said, March 1st, I think there are some pretty good things going to happen there. What did he mean by that? I'm sure Ari Emanuel was not on Pat McAfee's show talking about how great the women's elimination chamber is going to be. There's going to be some pretty good things going on there. We're going to get Tiffany Stratton and Trish Stratus against Nia Jax and Candice LeRae. No, I don't think that's what he was talking about. What did he mean by that? Could we still get The Rock on the WrestleMania card? He's been awfully quiet lately. Is he going to show up in Toronto? I mean, unless he somehow ends up inside the chamber, I don't know what he would be there to do. But then again, he showed up at Bad Blood, and that didn't lead to anything either. So do I think The Rock is going to show up and end up wrestling Cody? No, I don't. Because they have a chamber match. We're going to have a winner. That's the person going on to WrestleMania. Could The Rock still have some kind of involvement in the show, even, away from Cody? It's possible. I don't know what he meant by that comment, unless that was just, the CEO and president of this big company just trying to hype up a big show coming up. It could have been as simple as that. But it caught my eye when I read what he said. Because if that somehow led to Cody and Rock for the WWE title, let's just say hypothetically, somehow, I don't see how that would happen, but somehow, if it led to Cody and Rock for the WWE Championship, that would open up John Cena to wrestle Logan Paul. Because right now, I don't have a match for Logan Paul at WrestleMania. I don't know who he wrestles if not John Cena. The only name I could come up with, and I could see this, and I think it would be a great match, is AJ Styles. I could see Logan Paul and AJ Styles. AJ just got moved over to Raw. Logan Paul is new to Raw. They've never worked before one-on-one. Actually, now that I mentioned that, I kind of like that match. So maybe they could do Logan and AJ. But I think we're looking at Cody and Cena. Then you go further down the card. Roman Reigns. Right? Roman Reigns is not going to be back on television until after the Elimination Chamber. They didn't want him in the chamber because he wasn't going to win the chamber, and they didn't want to beat him. They didn't want to pin him. Right? It's one thing to be dumped out of the Royal Rumble. It's another thing to get your shoulders pinned to the mat. So Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins. When we last saw Roman and all those guys at the Rumble, right, they were all kind of tangled up together there when everybody got dumped out of the ring. And it seems very likely that Roman will be in the ring with at least one of them. But I don't really have a good spot for Punk if he's not a part of this. So I think we're looking at a triple threat match. Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins. All of whom have different issues with each other, so you can't say there isn't history there with some of them, and Punk has that favor from Paul Heyman. Is he going to cash that in some way, or are they going to hold off on that? I think it would be a great match. I think it's a compelling match. I always, in these situations, would much rather a singles match, like a hot one-on-one match with some deep story to it. But that would be big. Look, you put Reigns, Punk, and Rollins in the ring together, it's going to be a big match. Gunther is going to be defending against Jey Uso. We already know that. And there's a story there to be told. Tiffany Stratton is going to be defending against Charlotte Flair. That's been confirmed. And that's the match I've been figuring, going back to probably last fall, that was the match that we were going to end up with. Rhea Ripley defending her women's world title against who? To go back to what I was saying before, she's going to defend against Io Sky on, I guess that would be March 3rd, on the March 3rd episode of Raw. We don't know all the women yet who are going to be in the Elimination Chamber. I'm looking at the Elimination Chamber, and the name I'm looking at is Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan winning the Elimination Chamber to wrestle Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania would be ridiculous because they have played out the Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan story already, and they blew it off on the Netflix premiere, and that should have been the end of it. But if we get Liv Morgan winning in the Chamber, and then if Liv Morgan gets involved in the Rhea Ripley Io Sky match, right? Rhea or Liv and Raquel, let's say, they get involved, and we get no winner. We get no definitive winner between Rhea Ripley and Io Sky on March 3rd. Then what I think we're looking at is a triple threat match, with Rhea Ripley defending her title against Liv Morgan and Io Sky. So that, to me, is the likeliest scenario here. There are other options because Bianca Belair, for example, has qualified for the Elimination Chamber. I would love to get Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair at WrestleMania, but at this point, it would just feel rushed, right? Because they've had no interaction. Bianca is involved in a completely different storyline right now. And so I hate to say it, but I think they've already kind of missed the boat on doing that match this year. Probably better off holding off until 42 at this point. So that's what I'm looking at this going, Rhea, Liv, and Io is what I think the match is going to be at WrestleMania. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. They're headed for yet another battle. Kevin Owens was on SmackDown in a pre-recorded video, as Sami was. But Kevin Owens said, in response to the video that Sami sent in, talking about his injuries and how we're going to do the dance again, I'm going to get my hands on you, blah, blah, blah. Owens said, okay, let's do it. He invited him to Toronto. Cleared or not, because Sami Zayn is not medically cleared, you come to Toronto and we'll do it in Toronto. I don't know that Sami Zayn is going to be medically cleared on TV to have a proper match for Elimination Chamber, but they're definitely shooting an angle or doing something unsanctioned at that show, which makes sense. They're going to be in Canada, and it's kind of where they both started out together. Big crowd in Toronto. I mean, they're at the Sky Dome. You know, they're not going to have 60 or 70,000 people. I think they basically have it set up for 30,000, but it's going to be a big show. So the question is, if they don't do a proper match, are they saving the actual match between them for WrestleMania? And what the hell does that mean for Randy Orton? Because we have not seen Randy Orton since he got taken out by Kevin Owens with a pile driver. He has not been seen. He has not been heard from. He was not in the Royal Rumble. Is he going to show up in Toronto and go after Kevin Owens? It doesn't feel like it. So are we going to get some kind of an angle instead of a proper match in Toronto and then do Owens and Zayn in Las Vegas? I don't know what that means for Randy Orton if you do that. It doesn't make any sense to me for Randy Orton to eventually come back and not target Kevin Owens for what he did to him and just ignore it. That just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. Unless Cody retains at WrestleMania, Randy Orton makes a surprise return on SmackDown that week after Mania, and the first thing he does is he drops Cody with an RKO out of nowhere, and we're left to wonder, what the fuck? Why? And then the following week, we get the promo from Randy explaining how he came to agree with Kevin Owens. He sees things the way that KO does. You know, that Cody is duplicitous and Cody is a terrible friend and doesn't care about anybody but himself. And that's how we get Cody and Randy. Randy just sort of comes around to the same idea. Maybe that's the plan. Drew McIntyre is another one. I wish Drew McIntyre had something better, like a much bigger match than he's obviously going to end up having on this show, because he had just incredible year last year. And he's one of the more compelling characters on the show. He deserves better than this, but it looks like he's either going to be wrestling Damian Priest or maybe someone like LA Knight, because there was apparently talk this week internally about them, you know, considering maybe we should be doing McIntyre and Knight and playing off the real heat, right? Coming out of the Royal Rumble when Drew was all upset with LA Knight, and LA Knight made that little dig in his promo last week. Oh, I forgot to get my stuff in, right? I think that if you give me the choice, if I could book one or the other, it has to be one or the other for Drew McIntyre. I'm going with LA Knight. And I think Damian Priest is great. I think he's fine, but I just think the buildup and the promos and playing off, you know, that real situation just makes it a more interesting match. It just makes it a more interesting build if that's what you're going to do. The history, though, is there with Damian Priest. If you go back to WrestleMania last year, Damian Priest cashed in his Money in the Bank on Drew McIntyre. And then they had another match at Clash at the Castle. But even that was kind of a fuck finish because you had CM Punk interfering as the guest referee. So we really have not had a decisive winner between these two men. And then, of course, at the Royal Rumble, who eliminated who eliminated Drew McIntyre, rather, Damian Priest. Everything is set up for Damian Priest to be the opponent. Like, logically, historically, it makes far more sense for it to be Damian Priest. I just think, in terms of the week-to-week build-up, I would find it more entertaining if it was LA Knight going out there cutting promos on Drew and Drew cutting promos on him. He's already doing that on social media. He's already lighting him up on social media. I'd like to see more of that, to be honest with you. So let's say Damian Priest gets that match. Okay, what do you do with LA Knight? He's still over. You got to give him something on that show. He has made it very clear, as he did this week, he wants to get back his United States Championship. So do they just rematch him and Shinsuke Nakamura and he wins the belt back? Like, if you're an LA Knight fan, I would argue that a match with Drew McIntyre would actually be a bigger spot for him on the show than just wrestling Nakamura and winning the U.S. title. But that may be what ends up happening. But then there's Jimmy Uso. I was thinking about Jimmy. There was a segment on SmackDown Friday night where Drew McIntyre again was mocking Jimmy. Right? Look at your brother. Your brother's going to WrestleMania. He's challenging for a championship. And like, poor Jimmy. Jimmy's got nothing going on. I think maybe they're building to Jimmy Uso winning the U.S. title. And you could have both Usos celebrating at the end of WrestleMania, one with each title, right? Jimmy with the U.S. title, Jay with the world title. I think that may be what they're going for. So are we looking at another triple threat match here? This could easily be a multi-man match. It could be a 3-way. It could be a 4-way. Get a bunch of people in there, challenge for the U.S. title. That's what this feels like to me. All this fantasy booking of WrestleMania and all these potential multi-man matches, I'm having flashbacks to WrestleMania 2000. That's not a good thing. Braun Breaker. He's the Intercontinental Champion. They have teased a couple of matches for him. And it doesn't have to be WrestleMania, but they've teased something with him in Penta, right? It was just a one-off in the back many weeks ago. And they did the same thing this week, where he confronted AJ Styles and they stared at each other. And Braun told him, see you around. Is that the Intercontinental title match for WrestleMania? I would rather it be Sheamus. I've made that very clear before. There's a story to be told. With Sheamus finally winning the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania, no one's been talking about him for WrestleMania. I'd prefer Sheamus. Not that AJ wouldn't be a great opponent for him, but I would still prefer Breaker and Sheamus. And you know what? Gunther's going to lose that World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. I'd like to see Gunther working AJ coming out of that show, because they've never worked together before. That would be a great program. Gunther and AJ Styles. That could be what Gunther does coming out of Mania. Then you have the Bloodline, right? Timu Bloodline. Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, Solo Sikoa. You see that there is a drama from within the Bloodline after what happened on SmackDown Friday night. We're going to get Solo Sikoa against Jacob Fatu at some point, probably WrestleMania. I think that's the WrestleMania match for those guys. You've got Penta. You've got to get Penta on the WrestleMania card. They shot an angle at the end of Raw Monday night after Rey Mysterio lost his Chamber qualifier to Logan Paul, where the New Day ran out to attack him, and they went off the air 2 seconds later. We got to see none of it. Now, there was a video that was uploaded, I guess, to YouTube after the fact, of the attack on Rey. They went after his knee. They took a chair to the knee. It felt like an angle to write him off for a while. And what I'm thinking here is that, and I talked about this on Monday in my Raw review, and I see the vision here. I don't know if this is Triple H's vision, but this is my vision of where this is headed. You have the New Day. They're going to have to take out each member of the LWO. You know, Dragon Lee came out after the show Monday night to try to rescue Rey, and he got beat down too. But you got Dragon Lee, you've got Cruz del Toro, you've got Joaquin Wilde. They're going to have to take each member out, because if Rey comes back and he needs a partner to go after the New Day, he's got 3 guys right there, right? You've got you've got to come up with a way to get them out of the picture. And it looks like Ray has nobody, right? The New Day has gotten rid of every member of the LWO. Ray finally comes back sometime in March, whenever it is. He returns. And it's 2-on-1. He's got nobody to help him. And that's when Penta comes to the aid of Rey Mysterio. And we get Ray and Penta against the New Day at WrestleMania. You look at the SmackDown tag team title situation. I think we're headed for a multi-team match, probably a ladder match, which is kind of, that'd be kind of lazy, honestly, because that's what they did last year when they merged the titles. But I think that's where we're headed. Something with the Street Profits and Pretty Deadly and Los Garza and DIY. They're all going to lump them into one match together. So then the question is, what about Bianca? What about Jade? What about Naomi? Right? We had a segment on SmackDown where Nick Aldis, he received some anonymous cell phone video and he showed them, and it showed when Jade was attacked and they were loading her into the ambulance in the parking lot. We see Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez on the side, like scurrying away. And of course, the dumb baby faces just take that to mean, well, they must have done it. We know who the culprit is. Boy, Naomi looked awfully nervous when Aldis was about to show that video. So it's a misdirect. It's not going to end up being Liv Morgan and Raquel as the perpetrators. I still say it's going to be Naomi. It could be Naomi and Bianca. I don't see them turning Bianca heel. I think it's going to be Naomi. I don't know when we're going to get the ultimate reveal. I don't know when Jade is going to be back on TV. I would assume it would be in time for a WrestleMania match. But what's that match? You know what I mean? Like, is it Jade against Naomi? What the hell does Bianca do? Right? Who's Bianca going to be in the ring with? Are they still going to be women's tag team champions come WrestleMania? Maybe they're defending and losing the women's tag team titles on that show. That's what I'm not sure of. I'm not sure what the match for Mania is going to look like. The women's mid-card titles, they haven't been booked for shit so far. I don't even know that they're going to be defended on WrestleMania. And then the last thing is, we have not heard one name mentioned for this show. And that name is Goldberg. We have not heard about Goldberg for WrestleMania, even though he did say he's going to be having his retirement match in 2025. And teasing at the time that it would be against Gunther, although they never actually said who it would be against. So they haven't mentioned Goldberg. Goldberg has not appeared. I don't know that the match is happening at WrestleMania. Maybe it's going to happen on one of the Saudi shows. But that's just something to keep in mind, because I think a lot of people assume that if he was going to be retiring, it would be on a big show like WrestleMania. It still could happen, but we have not heard his name mentioned at all. When I look at this potential WrestleMania card, I could see where people would be underwhelmed. I do think that what they did last year has a lot to do with why this year feels less than. But again, we have 2 matches confirmed. I don't know where half the card is going to end up. There's so many different potential paths to take with some of these people. It'll be interesting to follow in the next, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks when they start locking shit in, what the WrestleMania card this year is actually going to look like.